Exactly.
Yes, and we are now live. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending upon whichever time zone you are. The advantage of a global workforce, global, presence is the fact that you now get to address people from all across the globe. So, a very warm welcome to this webinar. I was almost about to say welcome to cookie apocalypse, but that's kind of sounded oxymoronish. So you can't welcome somebody to an apocalypse. But nevertheless, as a part of Databeat's Knowledge and Insight series, this is the second edition of our webinar after the surprisingly insightful and a successful discussion that we had with a very interesting panel 3 months back on ads.text and its repercussions. We are now back again to look at a very pertinent, relevant topic of cookie deprecation and the kind of impact that it's going to have. Before I go ahead and introduce the panel, kind of set the context, let me first welcome you all, the audience, to this session. Thank you for taking out time. If you're on the Eastern time zone, then probably you just had your lunch. So I can assure you that the panel will more than ensure that you're wide awake over the next couple of hours or the next 1 hour at least. Uh, with that, there have been a lot of questions that we were internally discussing when we decided to go ahead with this topic. With Google forever kicking the can down the road, is this topic still relevant? Okay, and that was when we realized that with that 1% traffic now no longer having access to cookies, etc., it has given us the R&D team at Databeat an opportunity to look at not just hypothesis but also some numbers in terms of what could be the possible ramifications. Almost working with close to 45 plus clients with a team of 250 people, we were kind of reaching a set of conclusions in terms of what could be the possible impact. But then we realized that we have an amazing set of people outside who are doing very, very relevant work in the same direction. And we felt it would be incredibly useful, not just to our clients, but even to the wider publisher community, the marketer community, to get this kind of a panel at one place, put this kind of questions to them, put these numbers in front of them, and see what is the kind of steps that we need to take as publishers, as marketeers, to eventually overcome this apocalypse. See, at the end of the day, like all Hollywood movies, apocalypses eventually have a happy ending. But to reach that happy ending, what is it that we need to do? And that's a place where we realize that there is so much of confusion in the sense that, should I be using option A, option B, option C? What's the kind of impact, etc.? So our objective in the next 45 minutes to an hour is put some numbers in front of you, in terms of what can happen, what might not happen, etc., and take the opinion from the panel in terms of how we could actually move towards that happy ending. That for us is the objective for today. And to join us, to share with us their views, their personal experiments in terms of data, as well as to their predictions in terms of what's going to happen, we have with us a fantastic panel. And in no particular order, let's quickly run through the introductions. We have with us Rob Beeler from Beeler.tech and head of AdOps at golf.com. We have with us also Kathleen, who is the chief commercial officer at ID5 Solutions. Again, a very important player in this entire cookie apocalypse scenario. We are also happy that Linda Chen, Director Programmatic Revenue Strategy from Chegg, is joining us today. And she will obviously be leading the publisher angle on the show today. We have with us Mark Dixon, Principal Product Manager at Freestar. Again, somebody who has been doing a lot of work in this area of cookie identity and how to eventually reach that happy endings that we were speaking about. I also have the privilege to welcome John Shankman, founder and CEO at HTL. Again, a firm that's in the middle of working with a lot of publishers, a lot of advertisers, and therefore is, rightfully has the access and the information to come out with, a lot of useful predictions and data points today. And last but not the least, I also have Ashok Ganapam, CEO and founder, Databeat. As I said, today we will not be spending on time on Databeat. That we can always have another round of discussions. But on that note, we have also requested Ashok and Rob to kind of co-chair this entire panel discussion, move it in a direction that's useful to all our friends who are attending the webinar today. And as I speak, we are almost close to around 150 participants. So, Rob, Ashok, with no further delay, let me hand it over to you. We could probably start with a quick round of introductions from the panel and, accordingly then take it over. We can probably just go in the order of people on the screen. Caitlin, probably starting with you. A quick intro.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this group and this discussion today. For anybody who's not familiar with ID5, ID5 is the most widely adopted universal ID, we'll say cookie alternative online in the AdTech community today. We help essentially connect advertisers with consumers, and in doing so, support the publishing community, maintain and grow revenue in the absence of cookies or mobile ad IDs and so on. We view the world, just to give it that perspective, as we live in a cookieless present, I should say. You have 30 to 40% of the internet or the open web community, which is unaddressable today when you think about Safari or Firefox and so on. And so we've been working with our partners over the past, which vary in range and shape and size and discipline, to actually help bridge the future of the cookie deprecation whenever that may occur. So very happy to be here and share what we're seeing and from the clients and partners that we work with.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Ashok, over to you.
Hey, so this is Ashok. I was a publisher once, but in the last 7 years, I had the pleasure of working with a lot of publishers, a lot of ad tech companies. Personally, in my 15 to 20 years in the space, I have seen a lot of changes, right from the days of, the programmatic apocalypse, where, everyone was worried about the high dollars becoming pennies, then the mobile penetration and so on. I feel as an industry, we have always come on top of the challenges. We have figured ways to, deal with whatever is thrown at us. And I think the cookieless solution is one such very big mountain before us to climb, to conquer, where I think as an industry, we need to put that effort. We need to collaborate with each other and the advertisers and arrive at a solution that is beneficial for our industry as well as the consumer. So I'm excited to see what unfolds for us. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ashok. Rob, quick intro. You're on mute.
I walked in my own trap. Everyone that knows that I've got the you're on mute cup. So first of all, if Ashok's been at this for 15 and 20 years, why does he look like that and I look like this? I'm doing something wrong. Beeler Tech is known for our community of publishers, for being advocates for publishers. We put together events where we try to move the industry forward and any number of different things on that particular front. But that's kind of where we start, which is, again, the idea is that we are trying to understand what the future of publishing looks like, steer those people and support the people who help monetize and grow these publishers so they can continue to publish whatever they're passionate about. And of course, this is one of our biggest topics that we talk about in many different ways. And I'm excited to kind of dive into it with this particular group.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob. Mark, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, Mark Dixon, Principal Product Manager here at Freestar. I've been pulling my hair out in this industry since about 2015. Really excited about the opportunity to chat today. I think fits very well with what we do at Freestar, trying to help our publishers, especially as we're moving forward into a cookieless world. But the reality today that there are a lot of environments that are underrepresented as far as the advertiser side can see, where there are not cookies and there is not the same monetization opportunity. So I think there's that opportunity today, even if cookies did not go away in Chrome, that we can push solutions that help our publishers earn more revenue and, again, incentivized for the premium content that they are creating.
Thank you, Mark. John?
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Databeat. It's great to be here. My name is John Shankman. I'm the CEO and founder of #Labs. #Labs has done a lot of things over the past 10 years. It's a 10-year-old company, but it's really been focused exclusively on the revenue operations department for high quality publishers. Increasingly, it feels like we're helping publishers navigate monetization technology efficiently. And so this is the deprecation of the cookie and the emergence of new identity mechanics, let's call it, or tactics, I think is a real opportunity for the publisher to rediscover kind of the technicalities of digital publishing. And so it's obviously scary. It's obviously change is never easy, but I think it's a real opportunity for everyone to kind of come together, look at how the tech works and decide, what's best for the advertisers and the publishers as a whole. And, really, I think it's nice that the publishers have the opportunity today to drive the conversation forward, because the cookie was originally introduced as, a device for the publisher to do identity. And then the advertisers came and said, oh, well, this is neat and effective, and let's use it to track our advertising. And so I think publishing, again, has a similar opportunity to create new mechanisms for identity. So, yeah, I guess that's me. I'm John. And
Thank you, John. I'm sure we will, listen to more in terms of how ID and, how it has fragmented over time. So in the discussion, Linda, quick intro from your side.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda, and I'm the Director of Ad Strategy and Operations at Chegg. So a recent title change, and I manage the programmatic strategy still and oversee AdTech, mediation, operations for all advertising across all of the Chegg properties. So if you can imagine, my life is very much impacted by the cookie apocalypse that's coming. Chegg is a leading student-first connected learning platform. I think a lot of folks still remember us as a textbook rental company, but we've evolved tremendously over the years. We have a lot of different products and services that help students achieve their best in school and beyond. And where advertising fit in, even though we're obviously a major subscription business, is that we want to continue to provide some services and tools to students, in a cost-effective way. And that's where advertising comes in. And that part is definitely being changed dramatically by, the changes that are happening in the ecosystem. So I'm very excited to, join this panel today and talk a little bit about, the problems and challenges and how we're tackling it from the publisher perspective.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you all for accepting our invite and being here with us today. Before I hand it over, a quick note to the audiences who are on the webinar today. Please feel free to put up questions that you think are relevant to the panel. We'll make sure that they're reaching to the right people so that they can take them up, answer it. We also have a few polls, as we go through this webinar. So you can also probably look at those, and some of the best answers there, I'm sure, will also be delved deeper into, during the webinar, right? So polls, questions, please make sure that you are looking into those. On that note, Rob, thank you for accepting our invite to be a panelist, moderator along with Ashok. On that note, over to you.
I mean, it always happens to me just because of who I am and so forth like that. I do think that where we wanted to start, Ashok, I can throw it to you because I believe we actually have some data that we wanted to kind of start the conversation with. And then I would say to the panel, John kind of talked a little bit about the history of where cookies have been. I think it's going to be a good thread to kind of pick up on in terms of, again, why we've kind of evolved where we are. But so can you please kind of share your screen and dive into that part?
Sure. So Sam, if you could bring up the slide around what performance impact we see across browsers and environments. So as I was mentioning before, one great thing I see this year is more and more publishers are trying solutions, and they are ready to actually try, experiment and see what is working and what is not working. When we were doing this exercise almost 2 years ago, Safari was used as the benchmark to see what would happen if the cookie goes away. And initially, we were just looking at the CPMs and we were thinking, hey, Safari CPM is almost like a 35% to 45% lower than Chrome, but there is also a fill rate impact. So effectively, the impact we were worried is going to be pretty bad, which could drop the performance by more than half. And recently, in the last 6 months or so, we got the opportunity to see the data within Chrome. Nearly 30% of the Chrome is without cookie. And with various platforms, what we have seen is Chrome without cookie, in fact, is performing much better than Safari, where for $1 on Chrome without cookie is at 65 cents compared to 40 cents on Safari. So, and another thing, as I mentioned before, what we have seen is with time, compared to beginning of the year to now, I think the solutions also evolved. Initially, it was only like a 55 cents at the beginning of the year. And I think with more investments and learnings, the technology providers have improved the match rate and everything, where the recent data shows that the performance stands at 65%. Sorry, 65 cents or 65% of what a Chrome does. So while things are improving, we potentially could see a 35% drop in the Chrome revenue, if at all we have to go cookieless today. This is some context we just wanted to lay out there while we go ahead with the discussion. Back to you, Rob.
Yeah, and again, I put it to the panel of there is challenge and there's opportunity. We're going in this particular movie, we're going kind of for the happy ending. So I don't want to drill too much into history without sitting there trying to talk about this. But there is an aspect of this, and open for interpretation on this question of just like, how did we get here? And why, in a sense, are we talking about cookies going away? What did we do wrong? Anyone want to take that? Or I will assign you. Caitlin, please.
Sorry, so where do we go wrong? Well,
Where did we go wrong?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to speak from a publisher's perspective, but we have a unique vantage point because we do work with so many in the publishing community. I mean, the ID5 has been around for 7 years. The genesis of the company was really focused on helping publishers in the face of GDPR. And what we've seen through an aggregate, we'll say, with the publishers we're working with, is, and it's such a nuanced thing, right? There's so many dynamics at play in some of the data that was just shared. We typically see that with the publishers that we work with, they're able to achieve a 23% increase in reach because they are actually able to reach consumers or audiences in Safari environments where right now that's just sort of it's avoided by and large by many in the buying community as just sort of a crowded space around Chrome because cookies are still available. What's unique about that, though, is because you're able to associate audiences to those, or actually address those audiences, measure them in a Safari environment. It's what we see in aggregate is a 10% lift in CPMs across the board, and obviously there's variations in that for our publishers. Bid CPM goes up by 3x. And so we've built a lot of tools to help our publishers understand the impact of that. And And what you see is geographic differences. You can see, in Europe, for example, because of GDPR, because of the regulation that's there, perhaps the awareness and the need to respond to it even more immediately, you see variations in those numbers in those environments, as well as, depending on a publisher's tech stack and so on, you can see variations there too. I think this is one of those things that, programmatic advertising is a complex thing. And when you start talking about identity within it, it gets even more complex. Identity resolution means different things. If you're talking, to the trade desk about UID, you're talking to ID5 about the ID5 ID, or LiveRamp about Ramp ID. And so I think we're on a journey. Publishers have been the tip of the spear in realizing the impact of it. Supply sides come behind that, DSPs as well. Now we're starting to see more and more of the actual advertising, the demand side, realizing, wait a second, this is something we actually need to understand more when it comes to targeting and reaching our consumers, as well as measuring campaign effectiveness.
Yeah, and I would say, I would add, I would focus on where did we go wrong? Specifically, that as, no offense, Rob, I love you.
No,
As a qualitative judgment, right? Did we go wrong? Did we go right? I think that's a tough qualification, and it's really, this is what happened, and this is what happened because this is how the browser worked, and these were the tools that we had. And identity in of itself, when you think about it, that's a fairly abstract concept, right? How do you kind of, addressability to these squishy words that have kind of meaning prescribed to them, that mean different things to different people. And then when you're looking on the web and within the browser environment, there are these real technical realities and kind of blocking and tackling and frankly engineering realities that come up. And so I think, in the history of it, I actually don't know exactly why the third-party cookie was born. I think it was kind of born for the advertising purpose, but the original cookie, the first-party cookie, was born to really deal so the web server could understand who was coming back and who wasn't. And now the third-party cookie was kind of just a second iteration of that, which is okay, the other servers can set it, but not the host server. And so I think focusing on that is and I guess basically what happened was that got out of control, and now, or got out of control again.
That's the part I think I wanted to just kind of identify. And so I know I kind of threw out a twist question at all of you, and there's an aspect I think of what you hit on, John, that's right. I think there was, first of all, in the original part of this, as advertising went online, there was very much this promise of, I can reach, the capabilities or what was sold to what the actual capabilities didn't match, right? It was very much we can reach your audience in this way and so forth. And then we built on really kind of what was, third-party cookies doesn't cost you a thing really to set one. And it became kind of on that piece while trying to ultimately get advertising results. And that works, except that when you start to do it, and with nefarious reasons, then you start to alarm the regulators in Europe, who really have kind of been the ones that set up. And Mark, I want to go to your question, but Linda, I would throw it to you after that, is how excited are you to know European legislation inside and out? I mean, is that not why you got into what you do today? But I'll let you formulate that answer while Mark, please.
Well, to me, the question of where did we go wrong, it's not so much the technology as it is the consideration of the user, right? The technology is the means. And if we think about why we are at where we're at with privacy regulations, with the cookie going away, it's because who asked the user before deciding how we attract them, how we target them. And so I think that's one of the key things when we talk about solutions going forward, is that privacy first mentality. How do we as publishers on the supply side make sure that users, their consent is obtained, that they understand what's happening without explaining all the complexity of ad tech to them, but that there is that kind of buy-in, and that needs to happen on both the publisher and advertiser sides.
Yeah, so Linda, you don't really have to answer my question, but obviously you look at that same picture and really what Mark just said also, right? Which is the importance of consent. It's our relationship with our users. And then again, that can go from very superficial. Someone just kind of comes to our site, we serve them an ad if we have consent to serve an ad, to some of the stuff that Caitlin talks about where there's an actual connection and so therefore an ability to identify over time and things like that. But it's very fragmented, multiple pieces and so forth. How are you thinking about stringing this together into, a fragmented world into some more of a cohesive strategy? What are some things you think about?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the challenges of preparing for, cookie deprecation, and it very much is that there is no one solution. And the solution itself means that you have to tackle it from any lens. And, publishers' jobs are increasingly becoming more complicated. And we have to wear very, very many hats. And so, I mean, there's definitely an aspects of a big part of my role. Yes. Like, in fact, I definitely feel like I have a part-time job as a privacy counsel at this point. Because not only do I have to be very much aware of all of the changes in the regulation, but also the up and coming ones, like the ones in South Korea, and India has a very strict one too, right? And so we very much needs to be aware of them. And then we also have to have strategies around it for both the ad perspective, but also protecting, again, the users and our consumer. In this case, we have, younger student audience, which is very sensitive. And so I think there's that piece, right? Is that we have to be very aware of, well, we have to have a whole strategy around consent management and the messaging. Do we accept all, request, like decline all, right? Like even that is a debate amongst the AdTech ecosystem. And then from there, it's what data are we collecting, the sensitivity of the data that we're collecting, and then making sure that all of the vendors are adhering to it downstream. So to be on, like going into a lot of technicalities here, but not having a CMP and passing the consent string in the bit stream doesn't mean that all vendors adhere to it, because some vendors might be listening to a GDPR module in the pre-bit, right? Whereas I wouldn't know that. Like we would think that, having a CMP would be sufficient. So there's a lot of complexity even within, I want to collect first-party data. Like how are you doing it in a consent matter that's respecting the user? And then another piece of my job is also, obviously thinking about, well, we talked about how cookie kind of got out of hand. So now what are those alternative solutions that are user-centric, privacy safe, but at the same time still satisfies the needs of an advertiser and is the reason why our industry exists, right? So then we're thinking about all of the different, our jobs had always been complicated because there's an endless list of SSPs and networks that we partner with. And now we have to manage a long list of IDs and data vendors, and also understand how the ID vendors that we're now working with are working with the SSP vendors. And so there's a lot of complexity, even within just the types of vendors you work with, but it only gets more complicated because the tech is very new. The guidelines are still being drafted. In fact, it's waiting for public commentary in some cases, right? And so we don't know, the longevity of the solutions that we're investing time in implementing and evaluating. We don't know how they're differentiated and their compliance. Some of them don't have reporting capabilities. ID5 is one of my favorite because there's a lot there, but some of them don't even have reporting capabilities. And therefore you don't know which are actually providing lift. And if they are providing lift, same thing, going back into longevity. Is it going to withstand when cookies are deprecated? How much of it is still based off of cookies, right? How much of it is not? And not to mention, will this be enough scale for advertiser? So again, even just that piece of it, just managing vendors is a big headache. And last but not least, there's also an aspect of, as a publisher, we're also thinking about, keeping, again, going back into the first party data side, but also you don't just get first party data from first party data, and it's all not just contextual signals. If you want signals that are going to, if you want to, be able to continue to know who your users are, you need authentication. You need to actually have them signed up, signed in, and stay logged in. And so even that is a whole other effort in working with our product. Like, for example, I have a part-time product job now, right? In working with our product team in strategizing how to increase authentication. So we're doing competitor analysis, right? What are our peers doing? How are they messaging? When are they messaging? Are they soft gating? Are they hard gating? When's a soft gate? When's a hard gate? How do you explore, like, how do you play around with the messaging around different value proposition to justify an authentication? So it's a very long-winded way of saying that our jobs are very challenging, and there's everything that this group has touched on has now become a part of our job. And yeah, it is, I have no one solution. It's not one strategy. It's
and that's
many strategies.
and you're trying to do all that before lunch. That's literally on your plate.
I have my
the
coffee.
rest of it. But and this goes to everyone, right? Which is at that point, I mean, again, there is no one solution. This is about doing multiple things. And I think this all circles back to data, right? This all circles back to the signal that you as a publisher get as to what works and so forth. And so I thought maybe we could kind of explore a little bit of that. And then of course, then we can talk about the challenges of how that signal gets transferred down the pipe. Where does the advertiser fit in this? Because again, for all that Linda's got to sit there and try and, read into all the things that she has, we don't have a complete picture. And so again, I'll throw it to the panelists, to anyone that wants to kind of jump on the fact of that's what Linda's job is. Some of you are here to help solve for that. What are some of the things that can help? And by the way, not every publisher has a Linda either. So let's just understand that, this is a challenge for publishers. Anyway,
first of all, I do want to say that I believe in user choice. So I think the idea that third-party cookies have gotten to a place where we do need user choice, it is important. I think just the technicalities of how we got here is, neither good nor bad. It was probably the best decisions that people could make at the time based on the information they had. And so that was my original point. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. But on the notion of data, I think the world and honestly, to Linda's point, I can relate to that. I think the burden is often falling to the publisher to implement these solutions and find out if they're good or bad, even if the publisher is not the one who has, the identity providers or the middle layer is kind of saying publisher, we need you to implement this, and we're going to figure out if it works through the implementation. And so there's this element of product development and QA that's really coming through the business development department at these ad tech vendors, which is it's kind of a side note, but that's a pretty interesting dynamic that's emerging and frankly has always been there, but one that I think is worth unpacking, getting free QA and product dev through your biz dev team. That's interesting. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is as the world becomes increasingly data driven, and I think tools and technology are available to publishers and individuals for managing data. Again, data, there's so much data, it's an abstraction. How do you look at it? It's hard for a human, these are abstract concepts. And so we're getting tools now that allow humans to manage data at scale. And so I think just the one point I wanted to make that seemed to go over well in the prep for this was there's going to be two types of data, right? There is going to be that user data, and that user data is going to be that's sensitive data. That's subject to policy. We need to treat that carefully, right? That's going to inform a lot, and that's going to get in there. But on the other hand, and Databeat is really great at this, and a lot of people are really great at it. The revenue data and the commercial data that's a little less sensitive. Don't quote me on how sensitive it is, but it's not PII certainly. And so just, really using that data to inform your decisions around monetization and identity. So kind of separating the PII sensitive data from the commercial data and the monetization data.
I think, something that Mark touched on earlier about where we went wrong, which I think is a really, really sharp point, which is the consumer. And I think when it comes to how, what caused us, when you think about IDs, there's a lot of tossing around of authenticated versus synthetic versus probabilistic versus deterministic IDs and so on. And really what we should focus on, and this is something that, is at the core of what ID5 does when it comes to ID resolution, is consented IDs. So prioritizing, regardless of the signals, just to go back to your question, Rob, about signals, is it a consented ID, and how is this consumer ultimately consented to be identified? After that, then it's just a matter of what kind of signals you use and sort of the methodology you use to resolve that identity, and then in whatever data is associated then with the ID itself. There's obviously a lot of talk right now about signal degradation, whether IP goes away. Linda, you're talking about, building first party audiences and gated, do you gate, do you not gate? There's a lot of analogies that, first party data is, sort of the new oil, right? Which it's just unrealistic to think that at a large scale, publishers are going to be able to have authenticated audiences. By the way, it also conflates consent sometimes, particularly, in certain parts of the world, if the possession of an email. Our approach, and just to go back to that, like authentication or email or hashed email as one of those signals, is to work with our partners to make use of whatever signals they have at their disposal based on the unique aspects of their website, their partners, for advertisers, advertisers may have limitations around, no matter how big and powerful they are, around first party data as well. But to work with them based on whatever signals they have, always validating consent first to then resolve identity. And that actually it allows for sort of the volume or sort of insurance policy, if you will, regardless of where you are in the world, what kind of regulations are stipulated, whether IP address goes away or what have you, to actually build, sort of this way of leveraging both targeting and measurability of campaigns.
Makes sense. Mark, did you have a point on this?
Yeah, I wanted to add, like, going back to a little bit of what Linda said too, in terms of there being a lot of different solutions, and touching on a lot of what Caitlin was just saying too, in terms of the consent. And I think going both ways in the transparency aspect, all the way through the funnel from the user, the publisher, the advertiser. I think one of the challenges we see right now is that, there are a lot of solutions, and where we do see some performance in Safari and Firefox, the question is, are some of those solutions actually viable long term? Are they actually transparent all the way through that funnel? If an advertiser is buying on an ID that was essentially inserted by an intermediary in the bid stream, they're not really achieving their outcomes. There isn't that consent that is flowing all the way through. So we definitely see that, where we see, significant uplift already on Safari and Firefox and some of those cookieless environments, and that's great. But some of that's probably going to transition over time. So again, adds to the challenge on the publisher and supply side of how do you integrate, who do you integrate with, what's actually working today, and is that going to continue working tomorrow?
Yeah, Ashok, I'm going to ask you, I think you have some more data, but while that's kind of coming up, to Mark's point, something that I've heard someone talk about recently that I really think about again is just some of what we have to do with all of this, and this is really hard work, is we have to start building this the way that it should be built, not trying to just replicate the way things work. Mm-hmm. The hard part, of course, is there's no stop, and as of X, we're doing this. We're all doing business, and we're all trying to do this. And so one that's coming back to why the data is important is to see kind of where you're seeing lift. And again, publishers need lift today. They do not need to find out what they need lift next year. They need money now, and they're going to need money then, right? So there's a part where publishers are going to have to play kind of both sides here. But I think that there's a part of what you're just hitting on that, like, some of those are like potentially short term, and you have to think about it. And then I think the other part, I think this and lines into what Linda said, that just everyone should think about is what I'm doing right now good for my long-term health, right? some of you have heard me use this analogy way too long. Third-party cookies is a sugar-based diet, and we all are addicted to it. We can't get enough of it. It's time to eat broccoli or something healthy. And you know how hard that is, right? When you need to go on a diet and so forth. And that's where we are. But that, like, Mark, to your point, like, we need the data. Then we have to put it through the lens of, is this data really telling us what we should be doing or not, while trying to make enough money to see what happens in the next thing. And that's really convoluted and so forth. But you need a basis of data by which to do that. And by the way, tell me if I'm wrong, anyone. I respect this panel. But Ashok, I think you have some data to maybe point to. And you're muted.
So stepping into how the IDs have been helping, right? Like to Linda's point earlier, it's really difficult to get data. And but the good news is, with time it has been improving. Today, I think we can try to rely on a lot of the intermediaries like TAM, like the header bidding, options. Majority of the SSPs or AdTech companies are providing us. So over the last few months, they have evolved where they're able to showcase this data. So from that data, as you see here on the slide, on Safari, with an ID, we are seeing a 30% uplift in performance. And on Chrome, today we see a 21% uplift in performance with ID versus without ID. So actually, no, in a way, I feel this cookie going away could be a good news, because today in the market, 50% of the audience are not addressable. Safari in itself is not addressable, and within Chrome, 30% is not addressable, right? If not cookies going away, I don't think we would have tried to invest. When we say we, be the publishers or AdTech companies, would have invested, or advertisers for that matter, invested to reach this 50% of the users who probably are more premium than the cookied users, because more and more sophisticated users try to use some of these things where they can go and disable cookies and all that. So I feel, while it is very difficult work before us, some of the results, they're still not getting us to where we want to be, but they're definitely in the right direction. So moving to the next slide, one of the challenges we see today is the match rate. The match rate still is relatively low. On average, we see 40% match rate. And again, this is something that has been improving with time. So, I would just like to conclude here in terms of what a lot of our clients have been seeing. It is still suboptimal in terms of where they want to be, but things have been going in the right direction. And while the uptick on the Chrome and cookie itself is less, there are side benefits in terms of what Safari is doing and what Chrome without cookies are also doing today. So with that, anyone else like to share what their experience has been in terms of trying solutions? What is the kind of uptick they're seeing?
I can
I'd love to
chime
jump in, but
Please, you
sorry,
go ahead. I'll go. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I was gonna kind of comment on, connect the dots a little bit on the data that was just shown and your comment, as well as Caitlin's comment earlier around like yes, there are certain alternative solutions. I don't even want to talk about it, to be honest, because the question is, are they going to be relevant long term? Are they going to be compliant? Because to be very honest, like if you look at all of the consent banners and everything, it's all focused on cookie tracking, right? And there's no language right now. And in fact, the laws themselves right now, some of them are a little bit more vague, so it may be a composite, but there are very specific ones that, to be honest, like IPs that you brought up, is still acceptable, but theoretically for the use case that it's being utilized, probably not. And so I don't trust this data because I don't know if this is actually, whatever these alternative solutions are, I don't know the longevity. And that is the challenge as a publisher, is that, do I want to invest in it now? Is it that, am I going on another sugar high diet from a different, not cookie, but from a different ID that then I have to get off of, right, Rob? And so those are my initial reactions from, again, the commentary as well as the data that we're seeing.
So we've put up a poll here. We're curious about your approach to digital advertising and user tracking methods. Which strategy are you prioritizing this year? So if everyone could take kind of a moment on that to kind of weigh in on that and so forth. But yeah, I think, what I like, and I just want to make sure like everyone in the audience is picking up on is Linda's skepticism, right? And again, there's an aspect of this of going like, there is real opportunity. And I tried to answer while doing all this, one of the questions about the relationship between advertisers, publishers and the user. And in one respect, without third-party cookies, there's less signal. Less signal means less relevant advertising can get through to someone, which means advertisers will shift budgets away. That'll hurt the publisher. That'll hurt the user in that process. So that's one of the reasons why we can put apocalypse on this, because less signal can really have a negative impact on that. The same time, if we do the right things, the signal can get better, and the relationship with the user becomes better between that and the publisher. And if, again, I'm glossing over some very big steps here, but like if audiences understand that Chegg invests in putting people working to solve and give them a utility, to give them value, and that user starts to understand that that value is there and that they need to essentially vote with their consent, and then to sometimes some information, whether it be an email address or some other way to connect it, then those things create paths by which the advertising actually gets better and does things that, quite honestly, the walled gardens can't do. They got more data than anyone else. Yep. But there's something about the fact that someone who loves Chegg hopefully will continue to love Chegg, and at some point go, I need to vote for Chegg and advocate for Chegg to make them successful. And we have to just do that at a scale that keeps businesses going. Anyone want to build on that while we wait? I don't know if people are voting or not.
I told you, Rob, I had to bring up traffic shaping. I'm sorry, but
Yes,
I think it's an important thing in this conversation. And
yes.
We did build a testing framework. I know not every publisher has access to that kind of capability, but we can test and see what the difference is between loading different modules and not, in different browsers and environments and so on. But one of the things that we see, and especially talking to whether it's SSPs, DSPs upstream and sharing data, we can see that not all of those requests get through, right? So I think it's not even just about what the publisher is putting in the request in terms of the signal or what ID providers you're working with, but are some of your SSP and DSP partners actually surfacing that inventory upstream? Because it may not be getting through, because there's a lot of algorithm updates that need to be changed there, so it's not based on a cookie environment.
Can I add that, and I use this analogy, we just, Beeler, we just did something earlier this week about bid requests, and Mike O'Sullivan gave to me, the best way to kind of visualize this, which is you see a picture of a dog, like a photo of a dog, and you see a simplistic, stick drawing of a dog. That's what a bid request actually looks like. It takes all the amazing things you do as a publisher and reduces it down. I wouldn't even say the lowest common denominator. It's compression. You lose something in that signal, and then that gets passed on to an SSP, and the SSP looks at this stick picture and goes, I got to got to do something with this. And sometimes they're turning it into a cat. Sometimes they're drawing a little bit more of the picture in there or whatever, which is why I think this poll answer is really kind of interesting, right? Because as I'm seeing questions come up around contextual and whatever, all of this comes down to, will the buyer see these signals and then actually make decisions on that? And it's really hard to believe that context doesn't play a factor on ad performance. So we know we should get it in there, but the current process doesn't really help for that. It's too, and Caitlin, you can jump on this if you feel, but like the balance between audience and context, a lot of things have been gone to the audience front, and context is an amazing thing to add to that picture. But again, it doesn't always get carried along with the signal. Was that a fair statement? And any thoughts?
Yeah, so when I hear context and just in the in the context of the poll that we were just looking at in the results, like contextual advertising is incredibly powerful. Like I've worked at publishers where it's of great value. I think there's a hyper focus in our industry right now about cookies and targeting and audience targeting when it comes to, or it as infallible as cookies are, or you want to argue they are or not. And the thing about addressability isn't just the ability to reach the audience in the right context for ad performance, but it's also about being able to measure that performance. And so identifiers help with that. How are you going to frequency cap or do attribution modeling? And then the feedback loop that happens, between measurement and actual targeting. It's interesting. We actually talked to companies that are adjacent, we'll say, somewhat adjacent to like core media, like brand survey companies, like how are you going to actually identify a person who's seen an ad, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times to then properly measure brand lift metrics, right? Like there are all these ripple effects to it. And so I think right now that, and it's understandable, right? Because targeting is sort of the tip of the spear. But one of the things not to get too much into like sort of the future, the evolution of this broader conversation is, really thinking less about it's given us an opportunity to kind of open the aperture and think in a new way about identity. Whether you're talking about from the consumer, respecting consumer preferences perspective, or whether you're talking about measurement, whether you're talking about cross-platform, like unifying, how to actually measure a CTV versus an in-app versus a web-based environment, all right? Because cookies are really only a browser-based thing. So that's my perspective on sort of the contextual advertising thing. Like I think, there's we're going through this bit painful, but actually illuminating renaissance, of like what does identity really mean and what's the proper way to do it.
We have another poll as we kind of get going in here, and Ashok, I think we need to start to think about how we pull all this together. I want to throw something out just to the people that are asking questions to continue to ask your questions. I think there's this aspect that we're thinking we're going to try and get to that in a potentially different way, whether that be an article or something, because some of you have asked some really insightful questions, and we can't do this all afternoon, guys. We just can't keep going. Will the performance gap between Chrome and Safari without cookies widen or narrow next year? While people are answering, does anyone want to weigh in on that performance gap that's on the panel? Because we can't vote. We're apparently not allowed to vote. Mark?
I would have to think more advertisers are going to start buying in on alternatives, and that'll mean it will narrow.
I think so too. I think well, at least a couple years ago, I think we just saw that people were still buying cookies, even though not everyone was addressable. They just were not buying Safari. And now they're just kind of realizing, either opportunistically, which again, I think goes to Caitlin's optimism of our renaissance here, is that you start to go like, wait, people who use Safari actually tend to have money and buy things. So like, shouldn't we reach them? Suddenly becomes a really good question. Then it becomes how. Awesome. That's great for all of us, right? To just the fact that, lazy buying leads to poor results.
And also
really quickly.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's less competition in Safari too. So it's cheaper inventory.
Yeah, we just have to be careful when we talk, or I speak for myself, like, because an advertiser, you're talking about how the CPMs are lower in Safari when you're talking about audience targeting. For publishers, it's a way to increase, like working with a company like ID5, like it's a way to increase your CPMs, so to make sure we don't mix those messages, but it really, like, to be cliche, it's a bit of a win-win in that context.
All advertising has to perform, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that I think what we're going toward is, and again, third-party cookies, it's very easy to talk about the data behind it and the fact that I know I have cookies that say I'm male, female, and every age group, and I'm an auto intender and a golfer and everything else. And somehow that has always been a check the box type of thing. Again, smart advertisers, smart DSPs, are finding ways to cut through the noise. And so I think that might be one of the things around this as a point to kind of for everyone that's on the publisher side to think about is, again, the fidelity of the signal that you can get, and then to Mark's point, and making sure that gets through the path. Also, I'll add Caitlin's point, with consent, right, all the way through, and you start to go like people are going to start to gravitate toward things that are performant and actual and so forth. And I think that's ultimately navigating it, but there's going to be some tough times ahead with that.
Yeah, I see. Personally, in some of our conversations as old as 1-2 years ago, one of the strategies we gave to some of our publishers was, hey, you have about 30% direct sold. Safari is always a premium user because they can spend more technically. And should we transfer all the direct advertising to Safari and monetize better on the programmatic? But there also we saw many challenges where advertisers, they were unable to track the performance, conversions, and all that, right? And I think, going to my earlier point, hopefully with the solutions, the signals that we get, the whole web and in general, the internet will get democratized, where we are not biased towards that half of the segment which has cookies, but go into a place where we are trying to address the whole audience, right? All the users. So I know we are towards the end of the panel time. Unfortunately, I don't think we can take any questions at this time. So what we will try to do is we will probably respond to some of these questions directly with the users, or we will share some article to summarize the thoughts in response to some of the questions we see here. And personally, I would like to thank all the audience who had been here to share this excitement of discussing the solutions around IDs and cookieless world. And I would like to thank all my panelists here for sharing their experience. It's really very exciting to see various perspectives each one of us were able to share, both the optimism, the pessimism, as well as the possibilities here. So hopefully, with the kind of progress we have seen around the cookieless solutions over the last 1 year, it is particularly a more hopeful situation than before. And we already started addressing some of these audience who are not there, and with time and effort, hopefully the likes of Chegg would not have to go through so many challenges. Hopefully the AdTech will step in here to show the confidence to the publishers that, hey, we are going to check some of the boxes. You don't have to go through everything, and make these solutions a lot more simple, right? They will never be very simple, but more simple than what they are today. So anyone else like to add anything else before we wrap this up?
I thought that was a great note to end on. I myself, again, as co-moderator, really appreciate everyone's answers and following some of my, I'm still going to sit there like, where did we go wrong? I'm going to be thinking about that question from the start. Like, was that really the right thing to ask? But you guys ran with that really great. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for a great conversation. Thanks, Databeat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
On that note, thank you, audience, for being here with us. And, having sat through this entire discussion, I think we just scratched the surface. There's so much to do, and I'm sure, we will have follow-up sessions. For those of you who might have missed this session, you will be obviously getting access to the recording, a blog on it, etc., etc. But thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. Thank you for taking out time, being here with us, and making this, a very insightful session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.